month, we're starting a new theme, which is His story, God's glory. Last month, we had her story, His glory. So this month, it's His story, God's glory. I just think there are so many Bible characters that we can still learn from. There are so many things that we can get to know of who God is and just what He's done for us and how we can serve Him better. So last month we looked at Mary of Bethany, Esther, Tabitha, and more, just of the stories that showed us how God can call anyone and empower anyone to be a vessel for Him, because ultimately it's God that works. We are just vessels. We also saw that their life stories and obedient testified of God's faithfulness and His goodness. And we find that theme right through the Bible. These stories also highlighted that our actions, no matter how small, have got a significant and internal impact in people. So whatever we do and however we help people and however we assist or love or whatever, our actions can have such a big impact on people's lives. And that's part of what we learned last month. So this month we will continue with this path and look at men who were powerful vessels in God's hands. I hope that this will really encourage us to see our lives and our obedience can honor God as well. And that we can be part of that love story that God is still writing. You see, the Bible is a love story. If we read it and see the golden thread right through it, we see a love story of God written to His people, of saying, come back to me. I'm always there. I will save you. I will give you new life. And that we discover this morning that we're still part of that love story. And He's still writing that story for a world out there, for people who need Him, for a world that seeks purpose and hope. So we can still be part of the story that God writes. Maybe it's not written in this book, or maybe it's not binded into a book, but our lives speak to people. You see, they read us. They don't often read the Bible, but they read us. So let's go back to Judges. My last message was from Judges 4-5. Sukkel 'n bietjie met lig hierso. 4-5, where God used 3 of the unexpected people, remember? And the last lady, we didn't even know what her name was, and then all of a sudden she saved Israel. So after Deborah and Barak's song of victory, in Judges 5, there was peace for 40 years. And what happened after that? Again, Israel turned their backs on God, did their own thing, and the Bible says they did evil in the sight of God. And for 7 years, because they moved away from God and His protection, for 7 years they were in slavery again. Hy was laas so flou, maar kom ons kyk, dankie. Ja, baie dankie. Help so bietjie, dankie. Die oë is weer stupid vanoggend. So after Israel turned away from God and His protection, for 7 years they were slaves, and they were the Midianites and the Amalekites stole Israel's crops and livestock. Ek gaan nou maar my bril opsit. And livestock. And then after all of that for 7 years, and they were downhearted, they didn't know what to do, and then they cried out to God again. Said, Lord, please come and help us. And God sent a prophet. And that's the cycle of the story, or of the Old Testament. God sent them a prophet. But this time, the prophet didn't come to save them from the situation. The prophet came and he said to them, it's because of your idolatry. It's because you turned away from God that this is all happening to you. And the prophet left. We don't even know what the prophet's name is. It's not even written there. So God sent a prophet to explain to them what the problem was. Do you see the cycle? When it's going well, they forget about God. When it's not going well, they don't obey God. They do their own thing. They move away from Him and His protection. And then they cry out to God until He comes again and saves them. 40 years is a generation. According to the Bible, it's more or less a generation. They were peace for 40 years after the song of Deborah and Barak. A whole generation later, and they forgot about God. So we need to teach our children. We really need to teach our children. There's a new generation that needs to discover God for themselves. So I've given you a little bit of a there you can see it. They sacrificed to God, and that was the whole cycle that happened. They sacrificed to God, they disobeyed, did evil in God's sight. Then they became slaves to their enemies. They suffered and cried out to God, and then God raised up judges or prophets to deliver them from their enemies. This was the Israelites. What about us? And that's a question I'm just going to leave hanging in the air. Let's read from Judges 6, verse 11 to 16. I am going to talk about Gideon this morning. Gideon's whole story is written in Judges 6 to 8. And this is such a fascinating story. Please make time to go and read this and see the context of this whole thing. It's absolutely impossible this morning. I can just touch on one or two things. But it's a fascinating story of Gideon. And we all know it was the guy who hid away from because he was so scared. So let's read it. Judges 6, verse 11 to 16. And again, I'm reading from the ESV this morning. Now the angel of the Lord came and sat under the terebinth at Ophrah, which belonged to Joas, the Abizerite. Ek het dit so geoefen. While his son Gideon was beating out wheat in the winepress to hide it from the Midianites. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said to him, "The Lord is with you, O mighty man of valor." And Gideon said to him, "Please, my Lord, if the Lord is with us, why then has all of this happened? And where are all his wonderful deeds that our fathers recounted to us, saying, 'Did not the Lord bring us from Egypt?' But now the Lord has forsaken us and given us into the hand of Midian." And the Lord turned to him and said, "Go in this might of yours and save Israel from the hand of Midian. Do I not send you?" And he said to him, "Please, Lord, how can I save Israel? Behold, my clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my father's house." And the Lord said to him, "But I will be with you, and you shall strike the Midianites as one man." Threshing floors in those days were an open field. It was either rocky ground or it was a stone ground that they usually used in an open place. So where the wind could come and blow away the chaff, and people, the community used this place. This is not where Gideon was. Gideon was in a wine press, which was in those days either a square or a round place on a rock where just a few people could fit on that. So it was a very small place in a rocky place where they could, that was just big enough for a few people to press the wine, to tremble on the grapes. Here we meet Gideon hiding so that the Wat gaan aan volgend? Die tong is by die huis. Enemy does not find him or the wheat that he's busy with. So he's hiding away. It's actually an act of survival. So if we look at this whole passage, I thought, let's look at what God sees in this. God always sees more than we see. He sees potential where we see weakness. And by the way, Gideon's story, just think for a minute, does it sort of remind you of Moses? Let's carry on. The angel appeared and called him a mighty man of fearless courage, the Amplified says. Nee, hy kruip weg. Mighty man of fearless courage. In one sense, this was prophetic. It was a prophetic word. Because God knew what was going to happen and how he would use Gideon. On the other hand, it was a positional truth. Because God was in Gideon, or Gideon was in God, God was involved, God is with him, he's a mighty warrior. In his case, God was with him. In our case, God is in us, and we are in God. So it was also his position that he sort of prophesied. I'm with you. He said that more than once. You see, God saw the victory. He didn't see the fear. He didn't see all the other things that Gideon was so ready to tell God. He saw something different. He saw a mighty man of fearless courage because he knew that was his potential. That is what was still going to happen. It's also very interesting that God doesn't answer his questions. Lord, why? If the Lord is with us, he's talking to the angel with a small letter L and the capital letter L is in that scripture as well. So he says, if God is with us, why all these things? Why does this happen to us? But you see, God already sent a prophet to explain that to them. So God has already told them what the answers were. And he didn't explain himself again to Gideon. In verse 14, God answers him and he just says, go in this might of yours and save Israel from the hand of Midian. Do not I send you? So what is your focus, Gideon? Do you want to accuse me of things that's not happening? But you forgot, I sent a prophet in verses 7 to 10 to tell you. You turned away from me. You turned away from my protection. But now is a different story. Come on, I'm raising you up. Do this. Again, I have got grace for Israel. Again, I will save them. So what is the lesson that we can learn from this? This is the way God looks at it. And what is the lesson that we can learn? Sometimes we question God. And we forget that He's already given us answers. He's already given us guidance. He's already told us a few things. When we wrestle with God with doubt, we need to bring it to Him and seek His truth. Sometimes in our lives we do doubt. Sometimes in our lives we do question a few things. That's okay, as long as we bring it to God. As long as we don't stay there, ponder on that, and allow that to steal our faith. Because it doesn't change who God is. When God looks at you, what do you think He sees? I want to quote this preacher, but I need to read this. This preacher wrote, he said, "You are a blood-bought, spirit-filled, heaven-bound, fully equipped warrior with special armor designed to tear down strongholds of the enemy." How's that? Special armor. Because it's God's mighty works. The armor is not the physical things that we see that we put on, or even if we imagine them in our minds. The armor is the helmet of salvation, is because I know that I'm saved. So it's the spiritual meaning of the armor of God. Nothing can steal that from me. I've got that helmet on. Come on, enemy. You're not going to steal this from me. Etc., etc. So why are we all these things? Because He's with us. And He's in us. And it's His authority. It's not us. It's never us alone. It's always Him. In us. With us. Through us. If we obey and rely on Him, we are victors and not just survivors. Remember, Gideon was there because he just wanted to survive. Just wanted to keep this bit of a wheat that he had there to feed the family. The Midianites stole everything. The animals, everything. The crops, everything. And he just wanted to hold on to this. So that is what God says. Victors. His children, not just mere man. In Gideon, he saw this amazing warrior. He sees our potential. What did Gideon see? Shall we look at that? Gideon first totally missed the mighty man part. Remember? He didn't even say anything about that. His first reaction was to doubt about what the angel said to him. He ignored the mighty man. But if God is with us, what about my experiences? If God is with me. You see, often we want to get God to a place where He fits our experiences. It's the other way around. Our experiences needs to submit under who our God is. That's why our soul needs to be renewed. As we are a new creation in our spirit, it works through our soul, our emotions, our minds, our will. He questioned God's presence and why Israel is suffering. One positive thing is that he was quite honest about that he didn't pretend. And that laid the foundation for God to change him because of his honesty. That's why authenticity is so important. That's why we do not pretend before God. We do not pretend before each other. We need to be authentic. We all have got our things that we are still work on. Ek kan nie eens ordentlik preek nie, of Engels praat nie. But here I am, giving my 5 cents. We all struggle with things in our lives. But if we are authentic, we lay a foundation for God to change us, to make us stronger. When he realized that God wanted to send him, he had enough excuses, really. And that was his perspective of the whole situation. What did he see when he looked at himself? The least in his family from the weakest group? Net soos Moses. And God's answering to Gideon again in verse 16. The previous one was in verse 14. Now we see in verse 16 he says again, "But I will be with you, and you shall strike the Midianites as one man." Ek het nou net vir jou gesê, jy moet uitgaan in jou mag. Go out in your might. Now God repeats that again and he says, I am with you. Remember I said I'm with you. I'm with you. And you will strike them as one man. Just phew, like that. I wrote here, one person plus God is always a majority. So what is the lesson we can learn from this? Some of us hold an image of ourselves, our perspective, that is not only unhealthy, but often unbiblical. How do we see ourselves? We need to let the truth of God's word influence and reshape our understanding of our new identity. And I think this is where the secret lies for many of us. We don't understand our new identity. We don't understand who God has made us to be. Therefore, we don't walk in that. We still live, and excuse my example, but we still live as worms thinking that God's grace, He just forgave me. Yes, He did. And we can't do anything without Him. And if He didn't have grace and love for us, we would not be here. We would be dead in our sins. But there's something else that the cross brought us. There's a new creation. There's an ability to overcome because His nature is in us. His Spirit lives within us. We're not just forgiven. We're brand new in our spirit. And that flows over to our soul, mind, feelings, will. And eventually, it flows over to our physical lives as well. Let's read Judges 6, verse 25. That night the Lord said to him, now this is his first, dis sy eerste opdrag. This is his first assignment that God gives him. God has just said to him, I'm with you, we'll do this. Now God says to him, that night the Lord said to him, take your father's bull and the second bull 7 years old and pull down the altar of Baal that your father has and cut down the Asherah. This refers to a tree or a wooden idol and a goddess that Midian had that is beside it. And build an altar to the Lord your God on the top of the stronghold here, with stones laid in due order. Then take the second bull and offer it as a burnt offering with the wood of the Asherah that you shall cut down. So Gideon took 10 men of his servants and did as the Lord had told him. But because he was too afraid of his family and the men of the town to do it by day, he did it by night. Probably would have done the same. You see, Gideon's family became Baal worshippers during these 7 years and during the time that they forgot about God. They started worshiping Baal. And this is something that God would not tolerate. The Lord's altar and Baal's altar could never stand side by side. There is not, that reminds me of the saying these days where people say that all religions lead to God. That is not true. There's only one God with a Son, Jesus Christ, Mias often says. There's just one door, and that is Jesus. So the first commandment was, Exodus 20 verse 3 says, "You shall have no other gods before me." See, this is the first thing that Gideon had to do. Get rid of those idols. Make up your mind, are you going to serve me? If you serve me, I am the only God in your life. So before God could use Gideon, he had to remove the idols from their lives. They could not serve God and Baal. Are there still idols in our lives that we bring along because it's just so difficult of letting it go? Maybe. Small things that we don't always realize we should let go and let God take their place. The other thing is, he didn't feel brave, and he knew the reaction he would get, but he acted anyway. Although this could mean his death, he acted anyway. Doesn't matter whether it was at night or during the day. He acted afraid. Something I stole from Tiza. She always says, he acts afraid. And that I applaud him. Because although he was scared, at least he obeyed. Not much of a hero, is he? But God is not looking for heroes. He's looking for people who will be obedient. If he was looking for heroes, no one of us would qualify. He's looking for people to be obedient to his voice. So the lessons here, let's start with small acts of obedience. And the more we do that, the more we hear his voice, the more we get courage to do more. You see, God is glorified when we trust him despite our insecurities. Can I tell you a secret? Why do you think I can't pronounce words? I still get stage fright after almost 7 years. This is not easy for me to stand here. Let's do it afraid. Let's do it afraid. Faith grows through action, not comfort. And the other lesson is obedience doesn't mean the absence of fear. It means acting faithfully despite of it. I really want to encourage you to go and read Gideon's story. It's so interesting. I'm going to skip a lot of things now in chapter 6. Because in the following 12 verses, we read of that the people discovered that it was Gideon and how God saved Gideon's life through his father's reaction, who was actually also someone Gideon feared. And then God anointed Gideon, and he sent messengers to go and get the people together to follow him for this battle. So he committed to this battle, got everybody together, and said, okay, we are going to do this. In the meantime, while he was getting everybody together, he went to God and he said, God, let's just make sure I understand correctly now. Is this what you want to do, and are you going to use me? Are we going to be victorious in this story? Have you heard about the sign of the wet and dry fleece? He was busy with God, just making sure he's not missing this whole point. And you can read that in Judges 6:36-40. So when the people were together, let's read on. Judges 7, verse 2. The Lord said to Gideon, the people with you are too many for me to give the Midianites into their hand, lest Israel boast over me, saying, my own hand has saved me. You see, Gideon and all the men was ready to fight, but God had one last adjustment to make. Everything was not quite the way he wanted it. So he said, those who were scared could go home. 22,000 men left. 10,000 stayed behind. Okay, 10,000, okay, this is okay. But that's not what God had in mind. Those who drank water with their hands had to leave. And eventually only 300 people stayed behind. 300 men who lapped the water like dogs. Now, from 32,000 to 300, I'm sure Gideon was a bit concerned about this. They say that the first group who drank water with their hands were actually more prepared for battle because they could still look around and, if necessary, get hold of their swords to protect them or to fight. But those who put their face in the water were vulnerable and unprepared. And again, doesn't God often use the unlikely? Because that brings honor to him. Hulle het nie eintlik 'n klou gehad nie. But that's exactly who God wanted to use. So God knew that he needed a bit of courage to face the battle, which is 300 men. And he said to him, tonight go to the Midianites, to their camp. And he went. And he heard someone tell about a dream that he had. And through this dream, God confirmed to Gideon that the victory was theirs. Again, God is ready to confirm. If we step out, he's with us all the way. And he understands when we're a little bit scared, or when we get stage fright, or when we don't see how we can do things. God understands completely. He gives us assurance when we do things of his way, because he knows we need that from time to time. Another lesson is victory comes through godly strategy, faith, and God's power, not numbers. Godly wisdom, faith, and God's power, not numbers. And the third thing I wrote down here, your 300, or little bit, maybe your limited time, your energy or resources, but God can use it. God can use the smallest that we put available to him. Just think about it. We don't need a lot to be used by God. We just need obedience, and whatever is in our hand, he can use that. So, with God's wisdom, Gideon divided 300 men into 3 groups, 100 each. I said it's a fascinating story. And they went to the battlefield with a torch and a trumpet. Let me read it to you. Judges 7, verse 20 to 22. When I read this, I thought, no, I'm missing something here. But listen to this. Then the 3 companies blew the trumpets and broke the jars. They held in their left hands the torches, and in their right hands the trumpets to blow. And they cried out, "A sword for the Lord and for Gideon." Every man stood in his place around the camp, and all the army ran. They cried out and fled. Daar was chaos. When they blew the 300 trumpets, the Lord set every man's sword against his comrade and against all the army. So what happened? The Midianites killed each other. They only needed the trumpets and the torch to see where to go. That is what God can do. Those who fled were captured and killed. And if you read later on, you'll see that Gideon knew it was just God. It was not him. It was just God, it was not him. Because when they asked him to rule over them, Israel asked him now, okay, you are a mighty warrior, please rule over us. He said, no, I'm not going to rule over you, nor is my children. Let me read it to you. I will not rule over you, and my son will not rule over you. The Lord will rule over you. And I think every person needs to come to a place where we say, this will not rule over me. The Lord will rule over me. So what is our challenge today? And I want to ask Herman to leave it up there. While we have communion, just leave it up there. The first thing is, where are we hiding in fear? Are you and I maybe hiding somewhere in fear? Because we're trying to survive? The second thing is, what small step of obedience is God asking of us? Don't need to change the world. Just be obedient to what He asks you to do. You've got no idea what impact that can have on the world or on someone's life. And the third thing is, will you let your weakness be the stage for God's glory? None of us can boast in ourselves. It's all God. In us, with us, through us.